9:30, and I'm calling the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the agenda be adopted and printed as circulated.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And are there any, having adopted the agenda, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Councillor Mitchell.
I, Paul Mitchell, hereby make a declaration of pecuniary interest respect to agenda item 14A on the council agenda dated February the 4th, 2026. Because Janice and I pay commercial taxes on our catering kitchen, which is located on our farm, so we potentially could benefit financially if this change in taxation is adopted. And
you have that in writing for the clerk?
Yep.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes and business arising of the minutes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, that the minutes from the January 22nd, 2026 council meeting be adopted and printed as circulated.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Nobody submitted for public comment period. So public meetings and drainage meetings, and can I have a resolution to go into a public meeting regarding a planning application? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:31 a.m. for the purpose of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act, and that council move into Committee of Adjustment for the purpose of hearing a minor variance application.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I will turn it over to Planner McDonald for his report.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The application before the committee at this time affects property located at 221 McCarty Street, which is in the north end of the village of Temsford. In this instance, the applicants who are in attendance today have applied for relief from one area of the township zoning bylaw, that being the provision pertaining to the maximum total height for accessory structures. The structure itself is proposed at just over 1,000 square feet. It does meet the maximum required gross floor area. Again, they've only indicated that they will be deficient, if approved today, in the maximum height. So the township does regulate accessory structures to a maximum of, for an R1 property, a 4-meter height. The applicants are requesting a maximum height of 5 meters. For the committee's benefit, the proposed increase in height is ideally to add some storage space. The applicant has also advised that he himself does work on his vehicles, would like the option to have a hoist in this accessory structure so that he could more easily access the vehicles of his that he works on. I would highlight that as a result of circulation, there were no comments received in advance of the report being submitted. However, there was a call and an email that did come in both to myself and to township staff. A neighbor did visit township office with some questions. Most of those questions, I think, have been addressed. I do not see the neighbors in attendance who mentioned they may be in attendance today. That said, they had some questions regarding the potential use of this structure, and they had some concerns that vehicles would be coming in from all over the place, and this would be more a body shop or a mechanic shop. The applicants, again, in attendance today are aware that that's not a permitted use in the R1 zone. There is no intention to be servicing other people's vehicles. This is just for the applicant himself to primarily work on his vehicle and in his words, tinker on his toys. So happy to take any questions. We are recommending approval today.
Thank you. Questions for the planner from council on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? Are there any members of the public either here in person or virtually who wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any. Do I have a mover from the committee? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application A20-25 submitted by David Kasselbeck and Laura Fletcher for lands described as Plan 987, Lot 6 East, Part Lot 5, Temsford, and municipally known as 221 McCarty Street in the Township of Zorra as it relates to 1. Relief from Section 5.1, Table 5.1.1.3, Regulations for Accessory Uses, I, to increase the maximum permitted height for an accessory structure from 4 meters, 13.1 feet, to 5 meters, 16.6 feet, to facilitate the construction of a structure accessory to a residential use on a property zone residential type 1 zone R1 in the Township of Zorra, subject to the following condition. I, that the construction of the proposed residential accessory building detached garage be established in the general location as illustrated in Plate 3 of Report 2026-43 to the satisfaction of the Township of Zorra Building Department.
Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, this looks pretty straightforward. It is minor of an extension of approximately 3 feet, 3.5 feet in height. No other requirements for setback or square footage asked for any changes there. There was no concerns raised by township staff, and Spencer has addressed any concerns that were raised by neighbors. When I took a look and saw that the reason for the extra height was so they could put in a hoist, but I think, as Spencer said, there's no ability for this to become a commercial operation, so I think we should support the application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Anybody else? I do think that like some of the concerns raised by neighbors and residents are reasonable. You know, that you wouldn't want a residential property being used as a commercial one, and you know, the noise and the coming and going associated with that. But I think that, you know, when I asked staff about that, they you know, reminded me that we have a noise bylaw, and there's a bylaw against it being used as commercial because it's not commercial property. And I would remind the applicants, the neighbors, and any other residents that, you know, we have those tools in place so that they can be used appropriately, and I think we shouldn't, you know, do sort of blanket things to try and stop people doing sort of everything with their property because somebody might do something you know, noisy, right? That's a noise bylaw issue, not a height issue. And frankly, there's probably all kinds of garages in the township that have a hoist in them that nobody even knows they have a hoist in them. And as long as it's not a problem, then, you know, we don't have a bylaw against hoists. So for all the reasons Councillor Mitchell said, I will be supporting this as well. Anyone else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So that is your minor variance approved, and so then I would just encourage you to follow up probably with Chief Building Official Hughes with respect to your building permits and all those things. Then you'll be on the straight and narrow. Okay. Thanks. And can I have a motion to come out of the public meeting, Councillor Mitchell?
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, second by Councillor Finch, that the council move out of the Committee of Adjustment and pursuant to the Planning Act, that the public meeting be adjourned at 9:38 a.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And next item is 7A, delegations. Tracy Annett, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, as the Executive Director, and and coming up as well is Mayor Petrie, County Councillor Petrie, and in his capacity today, the newly re-elected Chair of the Board of Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. I'll turn it over to both of you. Just make sure the little red light is on, and Council will hear you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, right here. Okay. Thank you very much for having us today. I'll be giving a bit of a budget overview on the screens in front of you. So thank you. I see it up on there now too. Make sure we're all aligned. Materials were circulated to the municipality back in October, early November, once our draft budget was approved by the board. So I'll be walking through some of those draft materials in this overview at this time. With the conservation authorities and our goals and objectives, it's very much aligned with some of your own strategic objectives. We're talking about having priorities to enhance and protect the health of our natural environment. So highlighting a few of those objectives here. With the Upper Thames watershed, I always like to remind everyone the jurisdiction that we have, the areas of the multiple municipalities that we encompass, but really that CAs were formed based on that provincial municipal partnership. all of our programs that we offer and the services that we provide. It's really that long-standing goal to bring as much value in the way of environmental programming into our municipalities and through our watersheds as possible. We always leverage the municipal, excuse me, the municipal investment that we receive from our partners and then enter into further partnerships to provide that return on investment. Certainly, with our member municipalities, we're able to deliver broader watershed programs and services watershed-wide. I remind everyone, with some of the changes to legislation we've had over the last few years, that we've had to group our programs and services based on 3 categories of programs. We have our mandatory programs and services that are legislated by the province. They're considered mandatory and where municipal levy can be used to support those programs and services without having agreements in place. Excuse me. We have non-mandatory programs where we can enter into agreements with municipalities where municipalities have a requirement to deliver a program and service, and we provide that service on their behalf explicitly. And then we have other programs and services. This is where a lot of our broader watershed programs and services that support the natural environment come into, and we do those through having agreements with our municipalities. Really, the focus is to ensure that of course, programs and services related to improvements in water qualities don't stop at municipal boundaries. They respect that watershed perspective. But when we get into our budget development, there's a number of steps that we go through. We want to make sure that we are providing stability and delivering our mandatory programs and services to the current service levels. We have included a cost of living adjustment and reflected any step increases to stay competitive with our salaries to retain staff. Inflation costs are always a factor that drive up pricing of things, not only for the consumer price index, but we're also looking at that construction index when we're relating to capital projects. We have multi-year contracts that we have entered into, particularly with Canadian Water Agency funding. It's a significant program that we're providing and delivering out to watershed landowners. We also want to ensure that we're providing some staffing support for succession planning, particularly in some of our senior positions. And we had anticipated fees freeze and reduction in some other federal funding that went into this draft budget. With our operating budget and the overall in our Category 1 at the time of the budget preparation, we were projecting a slight deficit. I think through some of the funds that we've just heard about in the last couple months, even this past week, we're ensuring that that's going to be balanced, if not a bit of a surplus for us to utilize in future years. Category 2 is largely balanced as well. A slight surplus, we plan to use that in subsequent years, and that surplus was planned. In Category 3 programs and services, again, we're anticipating a deficit. That's usually how we operate. We are always out looking for additional funding opportunities to leverage the municipal investment. We initially had that deficit at $269 in our draft. Again, through just agreements in the last couple weeks, we know we've now reduced that deficit entirely. And then we also have our other Category 3 programs. We separate out our campground activities. We are projecting surpluses there, and we have a lengthy list of capital improvements that are needed, so we'll be applying those surpluses towards those uses. In the larger scheme of things, we always provide our operating funding sources for Category 1, 2, and 3. They're shown here on the pie. Again, it's a little bit unique in Zorra Township, where Oxford County pays the majority of the operating levy, and when the case of Zorra, it's the operating and maintenance activities for those special benefiting structures like Embro and Harrington Dam. I always like to show this pie as well because it really shows that split between what is provided through our levies to our municipalities, the self-generated amounts in the light green, and then where we've gone out and looked for other contract agreements, either through grant programs, contracts, some additional municipal contracts for, again, City of London ESA management as an example, and then where kind of our standard funding comes from the province. The provincial transfer payment under the Conservation Authorities Act being $181,213 hasn't changed for several years and used to be twice that. And then, of course, under the Clean Water Act, we have our provincial transfer payment there as well. That supports not only the Upper Thames, but the Thames and Sydenham Region Source Protection Area. As our operating expenses is shown, again, almost half of our programs and services are those mandatory programs and services that we operate under. We certainly provide all of those requirements, whether it be planning and regs, our water management and land management activities, the requirements for provincial water quality monitoring, for groundwater and surface water, drinking water source protection, implementing our watershed strategy, and then essential corporate costs, of course. A few other areas that I've highlighted in the Category 2 programs being a much smaller component. Our Category 3 programs, again, we've divided out and separated out those campground activities versus the broader watershed amounts. And though that $8 million for Category 3 programs and services that include the land stewardship programs, our community partnerships and education, additional ecological monitoring, and water quality database management, and extended water quality information that we gather, and some land lease activities. Those, almost $5 million of that is from our federal water agency grant. Again, those dollars are flow-through dollars that get out and do projects on the ground. I'll highlight a few of those later. With our capital budget, there's always work to be done to maintain aging infrastructure, especially related to dams. We know that our capital amounts vary dramatically depending on the municipality, and if they're a special benefiting municipality, we have seen those increases in building construction costs significantly rise between 5 and 17% for the London area. So we apply those types of cost predictions to that. We're always looking for alternative sources of funding as well. In some cases, we're able to offset for the WECI funding, the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure funding. Their application deadline is the provincial fiscal, so it doesn't always line up well with our budgeting, but where it's known, we will apply that as well. When we're talking about Zorra and our benefit-based capital, again, a bit of a summary of what was provided back at the draft stage for operation, maintenance, and capital projects, all of those together. The highlights there kind of identify where for Oxford County, and then Zorra specifically when we're talking about Embro Dam and Harrington Dam. Again, those values include both operation, maintenance, and capital type projects. And I know through conversations with staff, this is always the beginning point, that there's been some amendments to some of those projects as well. So on the next slide here, I always try to highlight the difference between our operating capital, which are those general amounts, and then the benefit-based structure amounts for each municipality. When we're talking about the general operating amounts, again, it's a nice 50-50 split between general and benefit-based. The certain amounts are highlighted there for Zorra when we're talking about Embro and Harrington, and also the capital amounts. Again, those amounts have been revised since the production of the document through conversations with staff. I understand the handrail project isn't going to be proceeding with having those conversations with, I believe it was Mike. When we look overall at our budget, we were trying to keep under that 5% increase. I know the last few years we've had a number of legislative changes and requirements from the province. We did see some double-digit changes, but we're trying to get back to that sustainability. Overall, it's been about a 4.9% increase. Again, we received that information from the province using modified current value assessments, so each municipality is affected slightly differently depending on how their assessed value has changed. 4.3% increase in cost apportioning support, which are those Category 3 programs, and then for levies for capital repairs, a 0.6% is applied there. Total of all, comparing from 2025 to 2026, it would be a 0.97% increase. Again, very much dependent on which municipality you're in, and in the case of Zorra, much of that is through Oxford County. When we talk about cost apportioning agreements, some of the key projects that we're looking at are stewardship and restoration, making sure we're getting out and delivering programs and stewardship to local landowners. Tree planting is always a big one, but in Thamesford, for example, working with the Thamesford Lions Club, native tree planting, naturalization, even coordinating and working on having the viewing platform and the fishing steps in. And those are the types of projects that we're leveraging through the COA funding at the province, or at the feds actually for that one, and getting the community members involved to doing those work on the ground. We do additional subwatershed monitoring and planning activities. And again, that information informs making science-based decisions. Aquatic sampling is a big one. The photo there shows them out in the field doing some of that. Again, in Zorra Township, we're collecting an additional 12 fish sampling sites and 14 benthic sampling sites. Again, to have that base information, so when there are development projects or even infrastructure projects moving forward, we have that baseline condition to inform what is in our local watersheds, and can be monitoring and maintaining that information to inform how projects proceed. When it comes to community outreach and education, there's certainly been a lot of opportunities for engaging communities and youth. I mentioned the Thamesford site where the Scouts groups came out, but even more broadly, our children's water festivals. So in 2025, it was at Woodstock. Again, serve the entire school districts within Oxford County, coming out to that festival. Over 3,500 students were able to attend, and even on our family night, 1,500 people attended from all over the area. Huge opportunity to have that hands-on learning for people to understand what we do and why we do it, and be interested and involved. As well, with stewardship projects in Zorra, these are ones where we're working predominantly with local landowners. 45 projects, that's so impressive, and a big thank you to your rural landowners who are engaging in these projects to make watershed improvements on their properties to certainly help everyone in the region. In the area of 450 trees were planted. We had over 9,597 acres restored or enhanced, predominantly through 31 cover crop projects. We had 10 nutrient management projects, 3 of those additional tree planting sites, and then 1 erosion control site. When we're looking at leveraging that investment, total project costs were over $481,000. We were able to provide grant funding back to those local residents in the neighborhood of $268,000. So, 60% cost reduction there is pretty significant. That it is that incentive to get this work done on the ground, engage local landowners, and ultimately they'll see benefits in their own production activities. A few highlights that we've mentioned as well in our draft budget. Wanting to, for 2006, continue on improving our customer service and transparency improvements. We had a consultant's report from Blackline to suggest some improvements. We want to get that progressing. Continuing on our hazard mapping updates for the North Thames and the South Thames branches. Some monitoring equipment upgrades, some development and implementation of management plans for our rural CAs. We're doing a pilot project with MECP, and increasing awareness about our sources of drinking water. Always important to do, but wanting to continue to highlight that. We're embarking on an Indigenous engagement strategy. The photo there is actually a number of the Antler River Guardians, both the land guardians and the water guardians, out at Embro to show them some of the EA type work that we're undertaking, what that looks like, and then took them over to Hodges Pond, just in Norwich Township, where a dam had been removed, to see those improvements. And then continuing on with some of our corporate services modernization. So what was provided back in October were some communications, the larger draft budget, getting out and having these discussions for input. I know staff have been meeting with staff as well about some of our capital projects. In January, we reviewed some of the preliminary comments. In February, we'll update any other additional comments received, and that's when the budget's considered at our AGM. But for future budgets, I always like to highlight that, there's some changes in the books. We're not sure where we'll be next year. Certainly thank you to Mayor Ryan for his efforts and input. We're certainly looking at a much larger regional area if things proceed as proposed, and we're not sure what that budgeting process will look like. But with that, all in there, some photos from the area, pike that we found in Zorra, and the steps that I mentioned in Thamesford Park. So any questions that you have, I'm sure Brian and I can answer them, or even Paul, who sits on our board, is very much involved in our Finance and Audit Committee, very familiar with his past experiences too.
Thank you. Questions from council for the delegation?
Thanks for the presentation. You're right. I've heard it before, but it's always good to hear it from a different angle. But for the last 3 years, the province has frozen fees on planning and permit work. And as of last week, they have not notified the Upper Thames that that's been extended for 2026. So the board approved a 5% increase in those fees starting February the 1st. It's safe to assume that since the government can extend the fees at any time, that any potential revenue from those fees is not included in this budget.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Mitchell, that's exactly right. We're a little cautious. We do anticipate there may be a letter of direction coming. We're not sure what that intends, so we're kind of keeping the budget amounts as the status quo for now.
And if it does come, it'll be 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
You said it.
Yeah. The second one is, if you look at the pie chart on operating funding sources, it looks like the Upper Thames gets a lot of support from the federal government, almost $5.7 million. But then if you go to the next chart for category 3s, there's a note that says, includes expenses to fulfill significant federal grants. So that's a specific program. Can you expand a little bit on, we're getting $5 million in from the feds, but we're turning around and handing it back out again too. So a little more information on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, through the mayor. To your question, that's exactly what's happening. These projects are intended to get work done on the ground. Yes, there's slight overheads for staff time to be going out. We have a crop advisor that goes out and meets with farmers to talk about what's going to be best for their land. But the majority of those funds, as you're seeing those expenses go out, are for the work being done on the ground. I saw provided in the table the 60% in that case of those eligible expenses that went out on mostly under that program. There are some other programs as well, but the same type of use of funds is to make sure that projects on the ground are happening. We're the facilitators of that, and often providing that technical expertise to be able to make sure that those works are happening in the right places and with the right partners.
So that's why it's so important that the levy is fair and that the other self-generated fees and whatnot contribute, because it looks like we're getting a lot of money from the upper levels, but we're just kind of the person in the middle that's distributing out. So
Yeah.
My last one is, when Zorra staff were here in November to update us on the Embro Dam, Embro Pond project, both Marcus and I expressed our frustration that this has been a relatively small project that's dragged on for a decade or more. And there's been multiple studies done, all kinds of consultation, and about, I think probably at least 3 years ago, the consensus was that the option we wanted to choose was to remove the dam and return it to natural stream. But yet the latest report is that we need another report, and it's going to cost the township $79,000. So if you could comment on why this process drags on so long, why it's so costly for a relatively small project that we would like to get done and check off our to-do list.
Yes, if I can, through the mayor. In response to that question, I guess one quick clarification is the $79,000 that's quoted is both operating, maintenance, and capital, but that study is a significant portion of that. And yes, I share your frustration. The EA process is a long, arduous one. I know the province has been looking at streamlining opportunities for the municipal class EAs. don't know if they've really turned their mind to the CA side of things and the CA-initiated projects. That's something that we continue to comment on because we do recognize that it is a lot of study and a long time. I think they are trying to look at opportunities to reduce the number of touch points or public consultation points in the process, but it still requires the studies to be done in order to inform decision making. And I think, yeah, we're at a great decision now. Now we're at this point where it's the detailed design and getting, you know, you can look at concepts until you make a decision and have that formalized. Now you have to look at the details for how you're actually going to be able to implement that desired outcome. So looking forward to moving on with that project. I think there's some great opportunities there, and we've seen where it's been quite successful in other areas to have something that really improves the environment and is a great amenity feature as well.
Thanks for the explanation, and I want to emphasize it before and today. Our frustration's not with staff, it's with the process, and we understand that the staff has to follow the process. So, thanks. Good to see you again.
I want to thank Zorra Council for having UTRCA out, and I'm going to make some comments from a board perspective. One, you have an excellent representative on your board. Paul is a dedicated member, and you have local representation on the board, which I think is very important. That is under threat. Today, having the ability to have the general manager come out and give an overview of the budget is under threat. The last slide there that was showing about the consolidation is proposing to put 81 municipalities under one regional conservation authority, and your voice will be lost. There's no doubt about it. They're not going to have 81 municipalities represented on that, and your local ratepayers and taxpayers and residents will not be directly represented on that board. Neither will mine. I need you guys to do me a favor and use your voices like you have to raise the alarm bells that municipal voices matter and local governance matters, as everybody around this table, I know each personally that you do know that. And that is being eroded. The policy direction has already been lost. The legislation has passed to place that at the newly formed board that will be provincially controlled and appointed. That's where the policy will come. The local governance policy is gone already. That's something that's been lost. And so this is a pattern of centralization that could affect each and every one of us as elected officials as well. Your voices are important. It matters that you're there, and it makes a difference, and it makes a difference to your community. So please do whatever you can to make sure that the people in charge know that that matters to you. We have something great with UTRCA, as do many others with their conservation authorities. We have the ability to have local input. That budget was formed from local input, and there's changes being made from local input that will make those services what we want them to be, because local governance says that's what we want them to be. So that is as a threat right now. It is very much at threat, and there has a great opportunity for you to get a bill wherever that comes through, whether it's here to Oxford County still, and have no say whatsoever, and have those local projects that we are concerned about, those local benefiting ones, be very low on the list, and have those funds that you've paid into the draft. That we have a great job of Finance and Audit Committee looking after a lot of money that's been wisely invested for the use of this area that is going to be, in my words, robbed away and with no control. So I guess that's what I'm here today on top of the board, is that to say that we may not be back next year. And that should be of grave concern.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Deputy Mayor?
Just a quick comment in response to the remarks from the chair. We've had some discussions here, and I believe we passed a resolution taking a position, but all of that sat in the back of my head through the entire presentation, and I think this was a great opportunity to have this information delivered to us. We get all kinds of information, and we see boxes checked in various projects and in different sectors. But sitting here hearing about the kinds of projects in Zorra, I've seen them, and I've seen the degree to which they were successfully implemented. I know that our Lions Club have big ambitions and work very hard for improvements and lack the expertise to know exactly how to do that. And we've made huge strides within our own staffing to make sure that we are ready to partner with our service groups so that we can help them have impact. And in these collaborative park improvements through the watershed, UTRCA has been instrumental in not only facilitating the appropriate environmentally sustainable projects, but also have helped expand those projects by sourcing additional funding streams and have been wonderful with our staff and our service groups. So while this change won't directly, immediately, necessarily remove the great work that is happening here, it is a huge concern for myself that when the decision making and the local voice is lost, how over time we will lose the ability to ensure that the intentions of this work and the funding that is raised through whatever method is impactful in the way that we know is important to our communities. And thank you to you for this presentation and to the high caliber staff that you have that I've had the pleasure of engaging with out in our community.
Anyone else? Thank you. I really, I have said many times, you've heard me say it many times, that the worst part of becoming mayor for me was I decided at that time not to be on the board of Upper Thames anymore, and I still really miss it. I really love the, you know, so much data collection, evidence-based decision making, and clear goal and pursuit of that goal through that data and evidence. I really have said publicly, and as the deputy mayor said, we passed a resolution here. Oxford County Council passed a resolution as well, too, making it clear that we do not agree with the province's current direction on restructuring conservation authorities. And I think, you know, not to recover that ground, but in the context of the delegation today, I think, you know, I'm not opposed to considering any restructuring. I mean, I'm infamously in favor of school board restructuring. I don't think because we have a thing that we should just cling to that thing. But the question we should always ask is, will our residents be better served by it? And I don't see any evidence based on the presentation today or my time on the board or past or the legislation the province has put forward or proposed that that our residents will do any better as a result of this, right? I mean, our conservation authority is imperfect, absolutely. So is Zorra Township, so is Oxford County, so is Ingersoll, you know? We're all imperfect. That's not the issue. The issue is, the issue is, you know, what's our ability to deal with that imperfection? And I think what I've said to many landowners in Oxford County and Zorra Township is, you know, if you thought you had issues with trying to get somebody from the CA to come out and stand in the ditch with you to talk about your drainage issue, just wait until you deal with this larger Lake Erie CA and trying to get somebody to come and stand in the ditch with you from coming up from Windsor or Waterloo or whatever, you know, that I mean, the local practicable issues that we deal with, notwithstanding whether you get the answer that you want or not, will be gone. And I think that's gravely concerning, because I think that means that residents are not, they're going to have the same issues. Rain's still going to fall. It's still got to drain, right? They're still going to have the same issues, and they're not going to have the same ability to interact with the bodies that regulate that. So thank you for the presentation today. And I think, as the Deputy Mayor said, we've passed a resolution in support of that, and we'll continue to advocate accordingly. Anybody else? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next item up is 8 reports from Public Services Department, 8.1 Roads Division, Report 2026-015 from the Director of Public Works regarding emergency culvert replacement financial strategy. Director Oliver, is there anything you want to highlight for Council?
Nothing to highlight at this time. Thank you.
Questions from Council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, one question on this, Steve. There was a third-party contractor involved in this project. Is that included in the $7,200, or is it somewhere else in that list of costs?
No, that is not included. It's actually included in the base price of the $38,620. All the external costs, it's the cost of the pipe, cost of the gravel, cost of all the rental equipment such as vibrator packers and things like that that we use to do the job, water pumps, and the contractor with that supplied us with the excavators are included in that base price. The $7,200 is our own equipment costs that went towards that project.
Okay, that's good. Just wanted to clarify where that fit into the numbers.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the report? I have a mover. Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that report 2026-015 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes, and that Council direct staff to allocate surplus funds in the amount of $38,620 from the 2025 Capital Bridge 180 project to fund costs to replace the large diameter cross culvert on the 23rd line, and that wages, benefits, and equipment rental costs in the amount of $20,651.24 be funded from the 2025 operating budget to fund costs to replace the large diameter cross culvert on the 23rd line.
Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, we talked about this at last meeting, and not only how well this project came off, but the good publicity we got out of it. There was a follow-up letter to the story in the Ontario Farmer from somebody that lives in the Flamborough area, comparing how we did with our project compared to how the city of Hamilton is dealing with a similar project in rural Flamborough. In the last line, it says, maybe I should move to Zorra where taxes are cheaper and they get things done. So even more good PR out of it. So
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick comment. As we're sort of continuing to move into this asset management framework, it is so cool to get this, the total asset costs, the breakdown of all the funding of the components. We know how it's being funded. We know the good news story, but we also have an understanding of the estimated useful life and then what that annual amortization cost is. And I just wanted to pull out and highlight for council, more just for us to keep in the backs of our minds, that the line item for the gravel from the Zorra pit, for municipalities that don't have their own pits, that line item would be significantly larger. We've made an investment and have access to the resource that we're constantly fighting the negative impacts of being home to that resource, but we also get to leverage some of the financial benefits of having that. So I think, what I like to keep in the back of my mind is that we have a great supply, but we need to be planning in the future to make sure that if we want to continue seeing these types of savings and valuing our assets within the scope of what they do cost for us here in Zorra, the same project elsewhere could have had a higher price point if they weren't accessing that resource at the value that we have, that our staff and previous council have taken the initiative to secure for the benefit of the municipality.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 8.1B, report 2026-014 from the Director of Public Services regarding Roads Division Q4 update. Director Oliver.
Nothing to update this time.
Questions from council? Councilor.
Steve, there's usually something in your report that brings the farmer out in me, and I got to find out how you actually do this. So how do you actually mix the salt and sand to come up with a 10% ratio?
Yep, thank you for the question. It's not very high tech.
Okay.
The truck delivers the sand. They know the weight of the sand that's been dropped off, and they just take 10% of the salt. It's weighed. The loaders have a loader scale in them, so they weigh it, they dump it on the pile, they mix it up, and then they put it up the stacker, and then it mixes again as it comes off the stacker. So it's not rocket science, but it works.
Sometimes low tech is the best tech.
Yeah.
Doesn't break down. The Superfiber project, if it proceeds, would they be installing their own fiber optic cable, or would they be piggybacking on what's Quadro's already put in?
No, they'll be putting their own infrastructure in the ground.
Okay, so
Completely, yeah.
potentially Thamesford could be dug up again.
100%, yes.
Okay. And then on your report on capital project budgets, a lot of good news there. The first thing that came to mind is, how did you buy a tandem truck for less than half the budgeted price?
Yeah, and that was a little bit of, wasn't very clear on the report. I could have done a better job of that. So when we order the truck, the cabin chassis, when it arrives at the builder who puts all the plow equipment on, if we pay for that truck on delivery to the builder, it saves us $8,000 in the total cost once the truck's completed, just so they don't have to pay the interest on while they're holding that truck while it's being built. So that's just what we're seeing now is what we paid to date. Once we take delivery, we'll be paying the other cost, which is going to be right around $202 to complete the truck build, and that'll be the final invoice at that time. It's usually close to 2 years by the time of purchase for the time we receive it now, so it takes time.
I knew it was too good to be true, but and I forgot that the standard and plow trucks are bought basically the same way as fire trucks are. You buy the chassis and then you customize it to what you want later on.
Yes, and then the cabin chassis is about the same cost for the cabin chassis as to put the equipment on that cabin chassis.
For the rest of it, yeah.
Pretty close to the same.
So I went through the list and the numbers you gave: budget amount, actual project cost, variance, and I added another. I added the numbers all up, and I threw in another $200,000 for the rest of the truck, and I came up with total projects of $2,947,000, and a savings of about $765,000, which comes out to a 26% below budget. So I'm glad. My question is, why is it 26% below budget? I'm glad I'm not asking why is it 26% over budget, but this is really good news. So there's got to be some factors in there why we're still far under budget.
Yes, and also a great question. Yeah, so there's several factors, right? Some of these projects, such as our Twin Pipe project up on the Perth-Oxford boundary, is a good example of the Pemberton Street. They are all engineered estimates that we plan for. They give us the numbers to put in the budget for these projects. At the time of tender, the cost came in way lower. So good, which is a good thing, right? So then at the end of the day, it leaves us a lot left over after that project's complete. It's always nice to build in a bit of a buffer, but that was a quite high one. Mm-hmm. Other variables why there's high variances after the projects is the ability to tender early, getting lots of publicity, like lots of interest in those projects because we tender early, getting lots of bids and competition resulted in some really good pricing for 2025 projects. Asphalt costs and asphalt cement indexes stayed very stable last summer. They didn't fluctuate like other years, so those small variations can make a big difference in paving projects because just a few dollars higher over the amount of asphalt that's used it drives the cost up quite a bit. So we always build in a little buffer and contingency in those projects and ended up not having to use them. So it was kind of a good story on that one for the paving projects. And also a simple thing, but construction weather during construction season was excellent. We had dry, hot weather, which is not good for some things, but for construction, it was great. So the timing of the construction went smooth, on time, no delays, so that always contributes in.
So combination of good management, good luck, but there's an old saying that you have to be good to be lucky.
Yes,
so
yes, very true.
We put ourselves in a position to get some luck on our side.
That's correct, yep.
And my last question, Steve, were the lower than expected 2025 capital costs factored in when preparing the 2026 capital budget, or was 2025 just an unusual year?
No, I wouldn't say 25 was unusual. The big thing is we don't consider what the savings on the projects is. We just don't know at the time when we start preparing the budget for the following year. We start in August. In August, these projects were about half done, right? And then even after the projects are completed, it takes up to sometimes 2 months to get all the invoices that for the cost for each one of those projects, and for us to give us an actual dollar figure what we've, what we invested and what we have left. So, long story short, no, the monies that we saved in the 2025 projects didn't go towards the 2026 projects.
But having said that, it could have an impact on 2027 budget and going forward, because we fund capital projects from reserves, and we've determined what level of reserves we need to do the work that we've got planned for each year for, I think it's the next 10 or 15 years, whatever we're planning for now. So in 2027, that number, whatever I said it was, the 765,000 or somewhere in that neighborhood, we could either use that money to not have to increase the increase in tax levy to fund reserves, or we could fast track some projects that we weren't going to do to 28 or 29, move them up. And in our conversations earlier, you also talked about that money going towards the asset management part of it. So if you can maybe expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, and that's correct. I mean, there's lots of decisions to be made with that money, and that ultimately is going to be council's decision in the end of the day. I mean, there's no end to it. Asset management's just coming into full swing. We're seeing some, extreme numbers, and Treasury could probably talk better to this than I can. We're seeing some, huge numbers that we're going to have to start putting away annually for all our assets, and roads as being a huge asset, along with bridges. So we're going to have to find some serious funding in the future, and this is going to help that. And the long story short, I mean, this amount of money is what's not going to come off of taxes anymore, right? It's just going to decrease what is going to be required going future. So it's going to come into good use, let's put it that way.
So good work, Steve, and all the other staff members that are involved in this. And so let's aim for 30% below budget for this year, since you set a standard.
We'll try our best, but
Any other questions? Do I have a mover?
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, that report 2026-014 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And reports from Corporate and Protective Services, Section 9, 9.2, Building Drainage and Bylaw Services Report 2026-003 from the Bylaw Enforcement Officer regarding 2025 Bylaw Enforcement Q4 and year end. Officer Robertson, is there anything you would like to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
No, sir, there's nothing.
Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mitchell.
Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Finch, the report 2026-003 from the Bylaw Officer be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks. 9.2B, Report 2026-007 from the Chief Building Official, Drainage Superintendent, and Building Services Coordinator regarding 2025 year end. CBO Hughes, is there anything you'd like to highlight for council?
Nothing at this time.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Mike, like Steve, there's usually something of, how do you actually do that out of your report? And it says about all the beaver dams removed on, were all the beaver dams removed on township property, or are some of them on private property? And if they're on private property, who pays for that?
So most of the beaver dams we remove would be blocking up a municipal drain in some way, shape, or form, likely on private property, and we treat it like a blowout on a drain, right? We get it removed and it gets billed to all upstream landowners that would affect.
Okay, and is the township involved in controlling the beavers, or we just let them come back and build more dams?
They seem to do that. We basically locate the dam, notify the trapper of where we want them removed from. So we're involved in it a little bit, I guess I would say.
Okay, so it's through a third-party contract? Okay. And the data about number of permits issued this year and over the last 5 years, I always find that really interesting because it not only gives us a snapshot of development, but it also gives us a snapshot of the local economy, because if people have money or expect to make money, they're going to build stuff or buy from people that build stuff. If they don't, they're not. And then we've seen, you said permits issued were down 20%, 25 to 24. New residents down 41.4%. But I looked at the graph for total permits and new resident permits going back to 21 through to 25. Total permits were down 48% in 25 from 21, and new residents permits were down an incredible 93%. But the question is, were the residential permits for numbers for 2021 and 2022 inflated by the Kingwood Townhouse development on Middleton Street?
I would say yes. When you get a large number like that coming at one time, it definitely makes a difference.
So it's not as terrible as it may look statistically.
No.
And speaking of Kingwood, have you been in discussions with Kingwood of when they actually plan on getting some houses in the ground? I know they've just started
We
basic
are
work.
in touch with them a fair bit. We asked that question. We're not getting a really clear answer yet on housing starts. They do have some plans on the houses they want to build, but we haven't seen them yet.
Okay. And I noticed when we did the budget that for the first time in my memory, there was actually I think it was an $88,000 deficit on the building budget, building department, which I think is the first time we've ever had a deficit. So I think that's prudent budgeting to base it on what's been happening rather than what we expect to happen. And if they do start building a bunch this year, that's a bonus.
It'll help.
We're prepared for it.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the report? Do I have a mover? Councillor Finch.
Moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, that report 2026-007 from Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent and Building Service Coordinator be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.3, Financial Services Report 2026-0017 from the Deputy Treasurer Financial Analysts regarding financial results to December 31st, 2025. Deputy Treasurer Bowery, is there anything you'd like to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
Nothing at this time.
Questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Gregg, that report 2026-017 from the Deputy Treasurer, Financial Analyst be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All's in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.4, Legislative Services Report 2026-002 from the Strategic Initiatives Coordinator regarding the regarding Strategic Initiatives Q4 update. Coordinator Sukraj, is there anything you would like to highlight before I ask council for questions?
Not at this time.
Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Gregg, that report 2026-002 from the Strategic Initiatives Coordinator be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? I really like this report and how we've moved to these regular updates on the strategic plan. I think that, in my opinion, slight commentary here. You know, municipalities that, in my opinion, that I observe around the province that are sort of, you know, again, in my opinion, relatively high functioning, a lot of the ways they do that is through like a clearly articulated strategic plan and giving clear direction to their staff on what kind of reports they want to get, what kind of policies they want to see, how they would like to see a budget built. And I think that in my time on council so far, we've moved from really having a pretty vague sort of, you know, hopey-wishy strategic plan to a, you know, certainly a much more structurally reported on and measured strategic plan. And I really would encourage staff to think about how do we transition what's been learned from measuring ourselves on that into what a new plan might look like going into a new term of council, because I think that that's where there really is the opportunity for council to build on but frankly, a lot of good work, but especially in the context of the strategic plan, to really articulate what are those kinds of priorities, where do we want to go as a community. I think we have tools now that we have developed that we did not have before in terms of staffing and reporting and structure that could make a new iteration of a strategic plan even more robust and meaningful. And I mean that from the point of view of articulating to residents, how do we translate what they want into what council says? But then the real goal of council, in my opinion, is for council to articulate that to staff and give really clear direction to staff as to what we actually want to see that will make residents happy with what we're doing. So I really think there's this phenomenal work has happened over this term on this strategic plan, and I would really, my comments are, we really need to carry that momentum forward into the new term of council to make sure that we keep building on that, because that's where the real, to me, that's where the real opportunities are to get our finances in order and really define service levels and what ones do people want changed and all those things. I think this is like phenomenal work and just opens up just more potential for the entire municipality. Anybody else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And correspondence requiring direction, 10A. Any questions on that? Councillor Mitchell.
Spencer, in the report, you said that the applicant has registered approximately 1/3 of the overall draft plan. So does that mean that 1/3 of the 36 conditions have been met, or is there some other criteria that you're talking about there?
Through the mayor to Councillor Mitchell's question, the reference in the report about the 1/3 is just referring to the fact that 76 of 199 lots have been built. The balance, we are awaiting registration and building permit issuance. So to date, there has been, and since 2023, there has been no real traction on anything beyond what exists today.
Okay. And a question that just came to me, is there any limits on number of extensions that can be granted an applicant, or this is the third one, second extension?
Through the mayor, there's no limit in the Planning Act on the number of extensions. They do, however, limit the extensions to a maximum of 3-year periods. You'll see in the report, staff recommending a 2-year period. That is, it's intentional. 3 years can be granted should this council wish to do so, but staff feel that 2 years also provides adequate time to advance at least some other phases of the development, rather than wait perhaps until the 3rd year to hope things improve as far as the economy and otherwise. So we are recommending 2 years instead of 3.
Okay, thanks, Spencer.
Anyone else? I have a mover. Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Gregg, that the Council of the Township of Zorra advise Oxford County that the township supports a 2-year extension of draft approval for the plan of subdivision submitted by Mimadala Holdings, Inc., SB 18-09-5, for lands described as Part Lot 20, Concession 1, North Oxford, Township of Zorra, to March 11th, 2028, to provide the owner with additional time to complete all conditions of draft plan approval and register the draft plan of subdivision.
Any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable extension. The developer is working in an economic climate. I'm sure they would have liked to have had everything built and sold by now, but that's just not the way it works out. So it's only reasonable to give them more time to work with this development. I was through there this morning, and there's a lot of really nice houses down there. A good addition to Thamesford.
Anyone else? I agree, and I will be voting in support of this. I do find it somewhat challenging, though, when I go to events and I'm told by developers, not saying that's this one, but told by developers and told by the Premier that municipalities are the ones holding up building getting done. Meanwhile, we have a draft plan of subdivision approved already. The property has water and wastewater servicing available, and instead of building, what we're getting is a request to extend the approval. So I get it, and I understand that the real reasons that developers aren't building are not, in fact, municipalities getting in the way of doing that, certainly not this one. So it's just going to be hard to put my hand up for it, but I am going to. Anyone else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And boards and committees, 11A, Ambro Dog Park Committee, 2026-01-22 agenda. Any questions on that before I ask for a motion? Do I have a mover? Councillor Stewart.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Gregg, that item 11A be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? Just happy to see the committee getting to work, and I hope that they get it done fast and get the dog park in there, and not so much humming and hawing, and just get them running around with the pups. Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 12 information items. Memorandum from Oxford County Public Works regarding 2026 Oxford County planned activities and projects. Any questions on that? Have a mover? Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that item 12A be received and filed for information purposes only.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And no unfinished business. Notices of motion, 14A, notice of motion regarding new property tax class. Deputy Mayor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Whereas the provincial government has created new property tax classes available to municipalities, and whereas the newly available small-scale on-farm business subclasses provide municipalities with the flexibility to tax the first $50,000 of assessed value of qualifying value-added and commercial activities on-farm at a rate that is 75% lower than the commercial or industrial tax rate that would otherwise apply. And whereas this is intended to support a level playing field with larger processors and off-farm businesses, this treatment is limited to on-farm processing and commercial facilities that are assessed below $1 million. And whereas this is part of Ontario's plan to encourage job growth in the agriculture sector and support rural economies. And whereas Oxford County, especially in a world of tariffs, automotive shutdowns, and general economic uncertainty, more than ever needs to encourage agriculture sector diversification and support our rural economy. Now therefore be it resolved that Zorra Township Council requests that Oxford County Council direct staff to consider the inclusion of the small-scale value-added business subclasses in the 2026 tax ratio policy, and that this be circulated to the area municipalities in Oxford County and ROEDC.
As the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I think what we've seen in the land use policy framework in the last few years have been some changes to sort of define and support appropriate economic development in the rural portions of Ontario. And because, you know, Zorra is primarily rural, this is something that I think we've all really noticed and paid attention to. We have such limitations in terms of how we generate the revenue streams to manage our tax levy. We don't have what urban areas have with, you know, industrial parks. The amount of revenue that generates allows for municipalities to do all sorts of projects. And so I think, you know, these changes in land use policy have been really fantastic. I see this as just being the next step in terms of the county implementing the tax framework to sort of match and align with what we're seeing in terms of supporting economic development in agriculture. There are businesses that may see the amount of tax relief through this to allow for them to continue to grow, thrive, and expand, and continue being a contributor to our tax base ultimately. This may also be the difference between consideration of a business model for some of these on-farm diversified uses that is part of what allows for them to take that risk and invest in doing business here in Zorra. So in the short term, I would like to acknowledge that this type of implementation, if Oxford County Council chooses to support it, would result in a shift of the tax burden. There would be no tax levy increase, but it would shift a burden that would fall on the remaining balance of those who paid taxes in Zorra. But I am confident that in the long run, through the support of our rural businesses, this will create the expansions, investments, and new businesses that will ultimately contribute positively and shift that tax burden back to higher ratio paying portions for us here. So while it is not our decision to make here in Zorra, we intimately know our community, our neighbors, our businesses, and as a member on the executive for Rural Oxford Economic Development Corporation, I know very much how this will impact our existing businesses and our future business considerations. So I think, you know, for us here today, it's really about asking Oxford County to take this into serious consideration, for staff to bring it forward, and then ultimately respect the decision that they will make.
Any other discussion? Councillor Stewart?
No, I was just going to say I'm in full support of this. Previous report on some of the added strategic initiatives talk about village cores and increasing the opportunities for local businesses. And as the Deputy Mayor said, this is looks like a small way that we can help support some on-farm diversified use. So in full support.
Anyone else? Yeah, I wouldn't add anything to any of that. I think everything has been said. Any other discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No bylaws. That feels weird. 16, items of community interest in the calendar. Councillor Finch.
February 10th at 7 p.m., the Beachville Museum is having a speaker series presented by William Butt, who is also putting on the Thistle Theatre in March called Mighty Men of Zorra. On February 28th, the Agricultural Society is doing a comedy show at the arena, and doors open at 7:30. You can get your tickets online. February 21st is a winter chili social at the Embro Legion at 5 p.m.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Next Wednesday, February 11th, 7:30 p.m., Wisdom Wednesday at Brown's Corners. Speaker is Jessica Lawson. She's a dementia educator with the Here in Perth Alzheimer's Society. She'll be speaking on memory, brain health, signs of dementia, and supporting people with dementia.
Anyone else? I think on Family Day, February 16th, Chelmsford Lions are hosting their usual event at the rec center, I think, right? Yeah. That's all I had. Anybody else? All right. No closed, so I think we're at confirmatory and adjournment. Have a mover?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that bylaw 07-26, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held February 4th, 2026, be read a first, second, and third time this February 4th, 2026, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And motion to adjourn?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 10:43 a.m. and the next meeting of council be called for February 18th, 2026 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers at the Zorra Municipal Centre.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried, and we are adjourned.